today to Attribution Time. Looking forward to our conversation.
Ian, it's great to be here. I'm a longtime listener, first-time participant. I hope we can do this every once in a while. It's been fun listening and seeing this podcast grow.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that. I'll give you your $5 later for that. Thomas and I connected through the Adobe network, through LinkedIn and all of that, but I really like your approach to consulting. I come from the consulting world, gotten to learn more about nomad marketing. And so the conversations today are going to be around how do we talk to executives? How do we approach marketing attribution maturity? And what are the difference between metrics and attribution? And so for those who are listening, I think for those who are practitioners, you're going to get a lot from hearing from Thomas today in this. So let's dive in. What's the different maturities of attribution that you're seeing within Nomad?
For sure. So I think that one of the sort of elements within attribution itself is first and foremost understanding the maturity of an organization. There isn't a one size fits all. This is what we need to do. I mean, we've seen this historically from organizations that come in with a first touch model, lead source tagging, we would call it at a tactical level, where it's how are we bringing net new individuals into our database, following what the technology platforms have set up out of the box in terms of tagging that all the way into our opportunity or deal cycle. Really, regardless of which technology, they all have their different flavor of doing that. And that worked for a really long time until we realized that not every buyer is going to buy their first time through your funnel, right? It is just not something that's going to happen. We've all sort of graduated from that idea. Whether we've graduated from that in terms of attribution is where we start to connect the dots there. It's right. We might know that that's happening, but we might not have a better way of understanding that. And then, so you see this from an attribution perspective, people move from a first touch model to a last touch model, where it's what's that thing happening that's driving opportunity or deal creation? Where are we actually handing items off to our sales organization? And then it became this conversation a lot of times of what was marketing versus what was sales versus what was CS. Where were our new business opportunities coming from, upsell opportunities coming from, with once again a single moment in time saying that this is going to get 100% credit. And as we've evolved, as we go through ABM or ABX or whatever we want to call that today, it's really been this idea of there's going to be 8, 12, 50 engagements that are happening along the way that are going to happen across the entire organization. And it's not necessarily a credit conversation. And so sort of stage 2 here is sort of evolving from just attribution being this credit conversation to it being an influence, being a participation in the deal, being understanding where in a deal you can get the most bang for your buck, where you should focus your team's resources. And it's really not just an evolution of how you're capturing attribution, it's what are you using that attribution data for, right? And so that's the first monumental shift that we're seeing across our client base, and what we're sort of preaching as well is really get out of the credit game, right? It's not we're signing up for marketing, sourcing X amount in opportunities. It's more of that, what is our holistic customer or approach to drive new customers for an organization?
Yeah, it's good, because if we just go back to the history of marketing attribution, or like how I've defined it, is it comes from marketing ops. And for all of those that worked in Marketos and HubSpots, the field in which we created, or what was automatically given to us, was a lead source field, right? So it was defined as source. And so I think that, has evolved for us, and to some extent of that's what that means, is this is the source of this. This is where it's come back to. And that's not true, right? But again, it's been kind of stamped in our minds from the very beginning of the evolution of attribution, coming from ops. It's not bad. It's just that's the challenge that a lot of people in operations face, because that's exactly what it is. It's influence, it's engagement, it's revenue drivers. As I've had these conversations, these are a lot of great terms that have come out of this to better explain how those work. I also want to go back to what you mentioned there. for those who are listening, you probably already know this, but it's just such a valid point. Back in the day, it was first touch and then it moved to last touch, and there really wasn't like this in between. And there's so many customers, and Thomas, this is what Thomas is getting at. There's so many customers that are still doing this. So if you're doing it, you're not alone. It's still very much a like prevalent thing in the market, but you just have to like, you know, you have to push through that. So that's the one big thing there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think honestly, it's not a wrong way of doing things as well, right? I don't want people to think that like just because they're there, it doesn't mean that, they're like we should throw that out and start something new. I think it is the basis for creating something that is more engaging. So it sort of is that evolution of you need to understand and do those things first, because it is what people know. Like, and we can talk about where that came from all the way back to marketing being, as an organization or a team within an organization, being looked at as a cost center and needing to prove their value to get additional budget. We're lucky enough to operate in a day where for most organizations that's no longer the case. But some of those historical reporting tools that we had put in place to prove value are sort of holding us back a little bit. And we just need to learn how to enable the rest of the organization to sort of open up their field of vision in order to understand how should we be reporting on tactics, because it's great that we're investing in them now, but how can we pull the different levers available to us to actually increase the overall impact for the org.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So what's like the ultimate goal with maturity? Obviously, like as we know, as just humankind, we are always maturing, or at least that's the goal, right? But what's like a client that you're working with that you feel really good of, like when I see XYZ, I feel like they're in a good place as far as maturity goes.
For sure. I think when we are thinking about enablement of an organization as it relates to attribution, and those are questions at the very forefront of a new project engagement technology implementation, those are going to be the ones where we're like, okay, like we're doing this right and we're thinking about this right. It's maturity is great. In operations, we're able to mature at lightning quick speeds. And that's what we've had to do, right? The marketing ops alone on an island, small team in-house. I need to learn a lot now because I'm getting asked real-time questions and I better go figure this out. Sure. What we really need to be doing is slowing down a bit and saying, what is the evolution of and flow of information we need to bring the rest of the organization along with to make sure that they're part of this ride as well? Because if you go from last touch to multi-touch under a custom model, custom attribution, a lot of different weightings in your model, even working with your BI team to create a model that is, for all relative purposes, significant and it's going to work. If you can't explain how you got there to the rest of the organization, if you can't bring them along for that journey, all of a sudden it's just marketing ops dictating to the organization, this is what's happening, this is what you should do. And it's going to ruffle feathers, not on purpose, right? But it is going to have negative impacts. And so all of a sudden you are now fighting a battle of data integrity and confidence, rather than having a real conversation for, now that we have this great data that we can use, what should we be using it for? And so enablement up front and asking those questions, where are our marketers from a maturity standpoint? Where do we need to bring them? Where's our sales organization? How do we partner with them? It's still a lot about the non-technical rollout, because we need buy-in across the board, and then the sky's the limit for where we go from there.
That's right. So oftentimes you think you have buy-in with attribution when the contract is signed. You would think, right?
100%. It's getting the dollars approved to be able to go out and spend. Yeah, that is.
But when you actually get into it, that's not the case, right? Because then, like, you're still like, how many times have you've been a part of a deal, the deal closes, now you have all this, and you get up to speed in 3 months or whatever, and then now with whatever attribution you're rolling out, and then but one person signed it, but now, like to your point earlier, now you're trying to incorporate sales into this. Now you're trying to incorporate, your your lead gen team into this because, maybe the field marketing team is what bought this product, right? How do you, how does that work? The buy-in piece, even though the contract's signed, the buy-in isn't always there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that one of the key elements here is sort of in combination with what we've talked about thus far is we need to really, in terms of maturity, move both of the ideas that we've mentioned forward, being get off of the idea of attribution equals credit. So it does not equal credit, because if you go into your attribution modeling, if you go into a more advanced world and you are still in the world of credit, sales is, you've already lost them at the end, right? Because sales, their job is a commission-based job where they are receiving credit for the deals that they are closing. And if you say, hey, this is what marketing should be credited from this deal, in their mind, that's them losing commission. That is them not getting full value of their deal, right? That right away, you've lost an entire huge segment of your organization. So it's get off of that idea first and foremost and start talking about the idea that what this is doing, as what marketing has always been doing, is helping to enable, drive demand, create new leads, increase the deal velocity, increase close rates, conversion rates through your funnel. That is your message to your sales organization. And what attribution is a way of us understanding what is working, what is not working, so that we can invest in the things that are working. We can test and learn new strategies. We can fail quickly, right? Like I had a great mentor who like embedded in me like the fail fast mentality is do as much as you can without going crazy. Make sure you have your reporting infrastructure set up to be able to identify what's working, what's not, and pull the plug on those things that are not working as soon as you are able to see that there's no way that you're going to be able to turn that around. With the idea being that that is what attribution does for us. It allows us to see where marketing engagements are working. And we can pile in sales engagements and CS engagements into those models as well. But at the end, it's how do our marketing engagements truly tie into what our organization's go-to-market plays are on the sales side. And from there, we can make improvements to justify marketing spend where we're in which channels, at which points in time, seasonality, all of that can get factored in.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast yesterday and they were talking about attribution and the individual that was talking about it was coming from the B2C space, and they're very intelligent across all B2B and B2C, but most of their examples were B2C focused. Needless to say, what was interesting about that was that individual, though, had like having lived and breathed in this marketing space for 20 plus years, still associated attribution to source and monetary credit and all of this, rather than it being a tool to help you understand what channels, what campaigns are helping drive revenue. It's not, and so it's really interesting. Like there's still, and that's part of the goal of this podcast, is to hear from people like yourself, to hear like it. Don't go out and buy an attribution tool just to prove value. And you already said that, but the value of attribution is to help you know where to spend your dollars. Like that's it. And then you see those levers pull, and like you said, you fail fast. You pump some money into there. Now, failing fast in a B2B world is a little bit slower than failing fast in a B2C world, right? So a little bit larger fall, right? The giant falling is going to take a little more time than a smaller individual. But you have like I think that's exactly what it is, and I just wanted to really highlight that piece for those who are listening, because it's just something that's really missed and is really convoluted in LinkedIn and other articles that you read about attribution, about this is what it's solving, and it's really not solving those things. It's helping you know where to spend your money.
100%. I mean, I think that from the standpoint of understanding the value of your different channels at a tactical level for a field marketer, at a tactical level for a digital marketer, it can be really helpful in the day-to-day. It can be helpful in creating their strategy. But when you boil it all up to overall marketing strategy, we're not just there to talk about the results of what has happened. And if that's what we were doing with an attribution tool, you are making a pretty big investment just to see what has happened in the past.
That's
You
right.
can't just live in the past. It has to be, what does this mean for what we're going to do in the future? And how are we going to hit our growth rate? How are we going to participate in that? What does the timing of that need to look like in order for the marketing organization to be a good partner to your other internal teams, but then also making sure that we're receiving enough data back from those teams as well, so that we
Yep.
can make those decisions and see what is truly converting versus what is falling through the cracks for whatever reason, right? But they can
Yeah.
be good reasons, bad reasons, but reasons that we can work together to figure them out.
Yeah, I like that about the data piece. So often it is a lack of data or a silo data, right? So sales has their CRM, marketing has their marketing automation platform, and that is not a complete picture of what's happening. And so, yeah, marketing comes in and says, this is what's driving pipeline. And then sales comes in and says, well, this is what's driving close one. And those stories don't align because why? Well, there's a data silo there and they don't communicate with each other. And it's so important to have the full picture of data, and which is why tools like marketing attribution tools, they pull from multiple sources, your ad platforms, your marketing automation, your CRM, and it helps streamline that process without having like a data scientist to build all that out. You just pay a fee and then you have something to be able to streamline the data and compressing all of that to make sense.
Yeah, it's the, how can we get the most data as quickly as possible? Try to include as much historical data as possible. And then from there, create smaller little packages of value for both the marketing organization as well as your stakeholders in other teams, right? It's the package the information, tell a story, agree on the story, agree what we're trying to do, and then buy-in will come from the action of actually being able to apply data within that, right? I think it's this,
Yeah.
if you just throw data at the wall, someone's going to say, great, that's a cool report, but it's
Yeah.
dashboard creation. It is truly being that data scientist and business analyst one and the same, and
Yeah.
making sure that it makes sense from what you're doing as an organization, and that you're not in this competitive landscape internally. You're in a, we are one team trying to be better, and data can help us be significantly better if we can just agree that this is the truth. And then from there, every discussion, you might disagree on what you do with that information. You might disagree on the tactics you want to test and learn from, but everyone in the room is leaving knowing that the other person in the room was leveraging the same information, might have just seen it differently,
Yep.
but
Yeah.
the conflict was for progress. It wasn't for trying to derail someone else's conversation.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm a firm believer that multi-touch attribution helps bring teams together. Like, yes, and I think the way that you said it, Thomas, was a spot on of, you all at least coming in with the same data set at this point, right? It is now like equal field rather than coming in from two opposite ends and then trying to make sense of it. You may not agree, may not make sense to everyone, but it's like it's all the same data. And I think that's just such a great point. Um, so it brings up a good point of like, so how do you end up going into those conversations with executives? Like at Nomad, you get to be a part of the full sales cycle as well as implementation, as well as execution after the implementation. So when someone has buy-in from like a contract sign perspective to now we got to actually report this up to that executive who signed off on this. How does that translate? How do you help prepare teams for those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really goes back into the story you're telling, right? At different levels of the organization, based on the maturity of an organization, you're going to tell a slightly different story. And it's being aware that there is a different story to tell, first and foremost, right? Like that awareness. Believe it or not, an executive does not care how much a given channel drove pipeline in a given month, right? They're just not going to look at that data. They want their marketer, their digital person or digital agency to have access to that data, but they don't, the number itself, once again, depends on the maturity of the organization, but for the most part, the data itself They're not going to be in the weeds of that information saying, how do we change our spend across our different campaigns in digital based off what we're seeing? So I think that really level setting that, what does an executive team, what does attribution mean to that team, I should say, is really important. And what is the value that attribution brings the overall organization, not just the data that attribution is able to provide. And if you are going to your executive team and saying, look at all of this great data I'm going to get, I'm going to be able to pull this report and that report, that's not going, you are not going to get buy-in for attribution at the highest of levels. It is just not something
that is not the place to prove on those reports, right? You're not, you do not go into that call to prove, look how great this tool is, look at all these data points, right? There are key metrics that are given to executives that you have to answer. And hopefully that's what you're able to do with attribution, right?
Yeah, 100%. And so it's the idea that, okay, what is the value that this is actually going to bring? And it's something that you just mentioned before, where this is going to bring the organization together into a single source of truth around what is actually happening to drive pipeline revenue, what's actually driving funnel conversions along the way, whether that's marketing qualified over to the sales team, whether that's different opportunity stages moving forward, right? Which for some organizations might already be too granular for your executive team. So like, just to be very clear, once again, the maturity here does matter. But it's the main point here is that understand the value that's going to bring your organization as a whole. What are you going to be able to do better as a team or a part of a team? What efficiencies is that going to bring? What conversations is that going to unlock? How much better are we going to be able to be as an org? That is what the executive team cares about. And to the point of, this isn't marketing credit, this isn't sales credit. If you have if you're president of your organization, you're CRO of your organization, if you're COO, if those are all ex-sales people, enable your CMO with the idea that, make sure that the line is in there somewhere, that we cannot close business without our sales team. 100% of deals are credited to sales, right? And even if you have self-service on your site for trials or people can actually buy in a B2B world, if you have to go through your sales team and an invoicing and contracting process to buy, either way, sales is involved somewhere along the route. Make sure that they know that when we're bringing them this conversation, this is not that credit conversation. Like attribution, that word, we almost need a new word for it, because it's like they're thinking in the old world of split. It is like, no, you get 100% credit. This is all about driving business value and resources into the right places. And that is the value this is going to bring to the org. It's not about me going to fight for more budget or anything like that. This is about spending budget wisely, and start there. Because if you can remove that old idea of what attribution might be in someone's mind up front, and you can get ahead of that, you're going to have much more people listening to you than in any other situation.
Yeah, that's money, because just to put a picture around that, right? This form has a 75% close rate. And so we give all that to sales. Sales is crushing it when people fill out this form. In the background, because you have a multi-attribution tool or a process or system in place, you're able to say, okay, the most common path to this is LinkedIn white paper form, or whatever, or LinkedIn video form for the white paper, right? Now you know that's the common theme. And so you say, hey, that's great. We can continue to drive pipeline of individuals to that form that makes sales successful, right? And you know that in the background, but you can you can display that by, like you said, here's sales gets all this credit. This is awesome. Great job for closing these deals. We have found that this is the most common pathway or journey or whatever you want to call it to that. And we will continue to invest into this. We need more money to invest into these things, right? Into building content like this out, and so on and so forth. And so I think that's just such a great call out when you're talking to executives. Thomas, thanks so much for being on Attribution Time. This was awesome. I think a lot of people were going to get a great insight, especially from the executive perspective. Appreciate you being on.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. This has been great.